You know, it seems to be just human nature that we look for a shortcut, you know, a quick fix. Sometimes, you know, we hear the get-rich-quick schemes, and human nature, that it seems to be part of it, and it doesn't stop when a person's a Christian. It's still a part of us, and you see this where people want this like magic formula to be blessed by God. You know, I know you've seen, if you're on Facebook at all, you've seen the Facebook memes, I'm not even sure what they're called, memes. Thank you, Charlie, for that cultural help there. Yeah, the Facebook memes of share this post within 3 minutes and God will bless you. You'll get an answer to prayer. They're all over. You see these people, and it's been good to see lately some other, you know, I guess you'd say the anti-post where it says God's not a magic genie that you can rub the bottle and control what He does. That's so great, but just the fact there's so many of those out there tells you, again, they want this magic formula. We want this, you know, we'd love it if it were true. You know, several years ago there was a book, and it had some good things, but, you know, the prayer of Jabez. There were some good things about it, but I heard some people, and it was like, oh, this is it. I found it. You pray this prayer, and God's going to give you just whatever you want. I thought, really?
Cosmic Santa.
Yeah, how in the world? First of all, to think that God can be manipulated like that, because I pray the exact right words of a prayer. Or the other side, if you don't view it manipulative, God is so anxious to bless me, but He stuck the magic formula in some obscure passage of Scripture. You know, He's not that anxious to bless us then, or had been, you know, in the middle of the Lord's Prayer or something where we're all going to see it. There is no magic formula to being blessed by God. Matter of fact, today we're going to see there's something that looks like just the opposite. You know, it's a warning of if you do this, if this is true about you, you're not going to be blessed by God. And it's in James chapter 1. And let's start at verse 5 that we looked at last week, but it definitely leads us right into this. It says in James 1, verse 5, "If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all they do." Do you see that there? When you ask for wisdom, you must believe and not doubt, because you won't receive wisdom, but verse 7, that person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Anything. Has that verse ever jumped off the page at you? Like, wow. Here's something that it says, if this is true of me, I won't receive anything at all from God. I say it's like the anti-magic formula. This is what's going to keep you from getting anything. Well, let's look at this. We're going to look at this passage today. It comes as we're in this series that we started a few weeks ago on James, the book of books when it comes to this practical book of down-to-earth stuff, and we're certainly seeing that. And we're seeing these practical things it talks so much about. When you look at the whole book, what I got from it is they're God's expectations for us. So the series is Divine Expectations. Here's what God expects. And we've seen it already. You know, we're seeing it in this passage here. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God. That's what God expects. But He also expects a certain thing from you. Ask, believing without any doubt. We saw the first verses that give us the context for this. James chapter 1, verse 2. "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds." That's what God expects of us. "Because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." That is, again, one of the most difficult passages. These section of verses, hard to understand, and maybe hard to understand, well, how do I do it? And so one thing we said, the key to this first passage in James, verse 2 and following, is you have to understand what it means. And that's been a problem. And so we went through it. We spent a whole week, and I summarized it like this. What James is calling for is, first of all, a decision. When it says consider it pure joy, it doesn't mean you face a trial and your automatic reaction is going to be, wow. No, you have to consider. You have to make a determined decision. I am going to face this difficult situation, this trial. And we said that can be external things that everyone faces, like natural disasters, whatever. It can be persecution as a Christian. It can be temptation. Whatever it is, I am going to face it with joy. I am going to consider it pure joy. He's calling for a decision to possess, and here's really the key, an attitude. Joy is not a feeling. Joy is not an emotion. Enjoyment is. Joy is an attitude. It's a state of mind. It's a frame of reference for acting. I'm going to have joy, and based on that, here's how I'm going to act. My reaction might be different, but my action, what I'm going to choose to do. And we define joy, and again, there's no one set definition, but here's what I put out there. Joy is confident assurance that things will work for God's glory because He's in control and He loves me. Confident assurance that things will work for God's glory. And that's what I want. That's my ultimate why, is for God to receive the glory. Well, I can know it will happen. Now, that doesn't mean it's all going to turn out great. That's not what my confident assurance is. It's that God can receive the glory. So that's the what. And we said we need to realize, in this sort of circle of what we're aiming for, oftentimes we focus on just the what. Most of us know what to do. The problem is we don't always know how to do it. So James gives a how, a decision to possess an attitude based on an understanding. This is how you're going to be able to consider it pure joy. When you understand, first of all, that whatever the trial is, it's your faith that's being tested. It says, because we know that the testing of our faith produces perseverance. That means whatever the trial is, some trials may test our patience directly, some may test our forgiveness, our willingness to forgive, some may test our self-control, all those things directly, but ultimately they are testing our faith in God. God, do you know what you're talking about? Really? You said I need to be patient. You said I need to forgive. You said I shouldn't get angry. I need self-control. Do you really know what you're talking about? Do I believe you know what you're talking about? Do I have the faith that I'm going to follow that? I'm going to rely on it. I'm going to surrender to your principles, your plan. Do I trust it's worth it to follow you? And then also, because I know, not only is my faith being tested, but the testing of my faith develops, it says perseverance, and we said it's like a persevering faith. It doesn't just see what's there in my faith, it helps my faith become stronger, and that perseverance, that persevering faith, it says will result in maturity and completeness. And that's the last part there. Based on an understanding which develops perseverance and results in maturity and completeness. Maturity is that level. I've reached, Christian adulthood. I'm not perfect, but I'm not a child. And completeness. I know about all the Bible. I don't know the Bible perfectly, every detail, but there's no big chunk missing so that I'm only focused on God's love and not His holiness, or holiness and not His love, or one or the other, or something like that. I've got all that. And this leads to the ultimate why. Again, you have the what, you have the how. In this case, consider it pure joy. The how, because you know that the testing of your faith, and it's my faith being tested, I can stand up to this, I trust in God. But the ultimate why is, I want to become more mature and more complete, because first of all, that helps me be closer to God. My goal is to become like God, like His Son, so I can be close to Him. And then the ultimate, the very inside of the bullseye why, is because that's going to bring God glory. When I face a trial with joy, as I grow and mature, that's going to bring God glory, and that is my ultimate why. Because it's not even enough to know what to do and how. There's probably a lot of things in this world where I know what to do and I know how to do it. Why should I do it? So we see all of that in this verse. And then it leads into what we saw last week, verse 5. If any of you lacks wisdom, well, why is he talking about wisdom? This is going to take wisdom to do all of that. If you lack wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. We talked about wisdom and the difference between knowledge. Knowledge is knowing what my desired end is. In this case, consider it pure joy so that I can be mature and complete and closer to God. Wisdom is knowing how is the best way to do that. How is the best way to achieve that desired end? And we also said in the fullest sense, it means doing what we know is best. You can be knowledgeable without using your knowledge. You're not wise until you use your wisdom.
Then you're complete.
Then that's part of the completeness. You've got it there. The knowledge is complete. The maturity is there. And wisdom is that part of us that says, you know what? I know what the Bible says. I know, but boy, I don't always want to do what it says. This got to be a little different. I want to act this way. I want to face this situation. Yeah, I want to prove I'm right. I want to do this. I want to show who's boss. And wisdom says, has that ever worked before? Come on. And we give into that wisdom. It is, and that's the wisdom. And ultimately, it's all from God. It can come from our experience, from others, but it comes from God. God, help me to get this wisdom. And look what it says. God gives generously. Not just a little bit, sorry, I'm out for today. Matter of fact, it says that it's the God who gives. He loves to give without finding fault. He doesn't point his finger at us and say, I told you so. Yeah, you should have known better. And then it will be given to you. How many prayer requests? God says, you pray and I'll give it to you. Just wisdom. But look what it says then. I said last week there's a condition. But when you ask God for this wisdom, you must believe and not doubt. That's all. You must believe and not doubt. We're going to see the New American Standard not have any doubt. Any at all. And it says, because the one who doubts, wow, he's like a wave of the sea blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all they do. Wow. We've said this whole passage, it's based on understanding. And today it's no different, although it adds another element. There's also an element of we need to do a little different translating. None of the major translations get this right. And I don't say that to undermine, your confidence in the Bible. The major translations are wonderful, but every once in a while there comes a part where they translate something a little differently, and it misses the point. And so we're going to look at this today, and in this passage, I think you can tell the key elements are this idea of believing and this idea of not doubting. Everything else sort of follows from. So let's look at those. First of all, we need to believe. And right off the bat, I'm going to tell you, a better way to understand that word is the word faith. And so if you look in James chapter 1, verse 6 in the New American Standard, it says, but he must ask in faith without any doubting. And that's really a better translation. And let me tell you why. First of all, faith and belief are synonyms. Faith, belief, they're both nouns, they're synonyms, they mean the same thing. Sometimes they're used differently though. Some authors, Bible authors, will use them differently. James uses them differently. John, he uses it differently than James. And so you have to look at the context there. Both of them can translate the same Greek noun. You come across the Greek noun, you could translate it faith or belief. Now, I think we realize you come across the Greek verb, there's no verb form of faith. Belief becomes believe, but there's no faithing, faith. There isn't a verb form. So that obviously is going to influence how a word gets translated. In the NIV and the New American Standard, two of the major ones, the Greek verb is always translated believe, believes, believing, or sometimes it's translated believers from those who believe. So they take the phrase those who believe and they say believers. But they translate it that way. The Greek noun is always translated faith. The noun is there, it's always translated faith. Except one time in the NIV, the new NIV uses belief. So again, to try to set this up here, well, James 1:6 is like the exception to this. In the NIV, it ignores things. Donovan, you'd help me out a lot if you could sit still. Thanks. In the NIV in 1:6, first of all, it ignores the word ask. I mean, look at the New American Standard Version. But he must ask in faith. But the NIV says he must believe. They totally ignore the word ask. And then also, it translates the Greek noun with a verb. It's the noun there. Faith, belief. They translate it, must believe. And here's the thing. In general, that might be okay. And you're thinking, Steve, I didn't come here for a grammar lesson. I hated it in school. I hate it today. In general, it would be okay, but not in James. James uses the verb differently than the noun. He uses what's translated in other places believe differently than when he uses the noun and it's translated faith. And they ignore that in this verse, and it adds to this confusion. So first of all, let's ask, to understand how they can have different meanings, what are the three, and it's not so much meanings, it's aspects of this word faith. It's not like they're totally separate. They build on each other. First of all, you have faith as truth. The word faith can be used to mean that the truth of the Bible in general, the principles of the Bible. This is Jude 1:3. Jude writes, he says, I felt compelled to write and urge you to contend for the faith that was once for all entrusted to God's holy people. See, he's talking about the biblical principles. He says, you have received the truth, God's truth. I'm writing for you to contend for that. There's people coming in trying to distort it. There's people coming in contradicting it, arguing against it. You need to stand up for the truth, the faith, once delivered. So there's faith as truth. And that one there, again, it's the least common. That's like the only verse I think in the Bible. But it's the basis. Because you take that faith as truth, and the next one, faith as assent. Faith is assent, and that's intellectual acceptance. That's a judgment of the mind regarding a truth claim. So someone says there is a God, that's faith is truth. Well, do I believe it or not? Do I assent to it? I believe that something is true or I don't. So faith can be used in that way. And often that's translated believe. James 2:19 says, you believe there is one God. In your mind, you've heard the statement, there's a God, you believe it. Good, he says, even the demons believe that and shudder. And so you can tell from that, it's just in their mind. They believe without a shadow of a doubt there is one God. They believe it. As a matter of fact, they believe all the major doctrines. Jesus was his son, he died for sins, rose from the dead. Demons believe all that. Now, you do have to realize, and I said, it's not like you can take this and apply it everywhere, because in the book of John, John uses believe to include not only I believe in my mind, but this next aspect, faith is trust. So you have faith is truth. Here's the statement. Faith is belief. I believe it's true in my mind. Faith is trust. I commit to it. I'm surrendered to it. I rely upon it. There's a big difference there. It's a commitment of the heart. Assent is a matter of the mind. Trust is a commitment of the heart. I am going to trust. This one could be described as belief in a person or an idea. It's one thing to say, I believe that is true. But if you say, I believe in a person, what are you saying? I'm like committed to him. I believe in them. You know, everything they say, but I'm committed to them. I believe in them. That's the difference. And this can be used regarding salvation, Galatians 2:16. Know that a person is not justified by the works of the law, but by faith in Jesus Christ. So we too have put our faith in Christ Jesus, that we may be justified by faith in Christ and not by works of law. In other words, we don't trust in, we don't rely upon, how am I getting to heaven? Well, because I've done so many good works of the law. That's what I rely upon. No, this is saying the faith I rely upon, I'm surrendered to Christ. That's my way of getting into heaven. The Bible says it's true, I believe it's true, I'm committed to it. Faith is truth, assent, and faith as trust. And it's also, you can apply this kind of faith to provision, that God will provide for my needs. And that's what we've seen in the first part of this chapter, where James says, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith. How are trials testing my faith? Well, who am I going to rely upon? Who am I going to commit to? Who am I going to surrender to in this situation? Am I going to try to do it all myself, or am I going to rely upon God? That's what's being tested. Am I going to surrender to God's principles when a part of me says, hey, I'd rather do this? That's what's being tested. Not just I believe God's words are true. Best, I do it. I commit to it. I follow through on it. You know, if you were to take this into, again, try to illustrate this in another situation. If you had some terrible disease and you go to the doctor and the doctor says, here, take this, it will make you well. That's the truth claim. Doctor is saying, if you take this, it will make you well. Well, you're now faced, do I believe it or not? Do I believe it's true? And if you believe it's true, then what's the next step? You take it. I take this medicine, I rely upon it to cure me, to make me well. And so you've got all three of those aspects. The truth, the belief, the trust. And usually the assent is, we describe that as belief. That just in my mind, that one is never called, faith. Faith includes the other. So oftentimes that one's called belief. That's in the mind, where faith is that commitment. I've taken it a step further. And so here's what it all comes down to. When James says ask in faith, as the New American Standard puts it, he's not only talking about assent. He's not only talking about belief. He's not saying believe that God can give you wisdom. And this is why it's so important, because James specifically uses the verb for assent only. When he talks about the demons, even the demons believe. Even their mind, assent in their mind. I believe the statement is true, there is one God. Even the demons believe that. He doesn't say even the demons have faith in God. Because they don't have faith in God. They believe the statements about God are true. You see the difference? And that's why it's important to translate this the way it should be. You must ask in faith. Not just ask believing it's true, but you must ask with this commitment, this surrender, this reliance. Again, he's not saying when you ask for wisdom, you must believe God will give it. You must have faith. You got to have this commitment, this reliance, this surrender. What is it? When I ask God for wisdom, God, I will accept whatever wisdom you give. That's what he's saying. He's not saying when you ask God for wisdom, believe he'll give it. He's saying when you ask God for wisdom, be open and accepting, surrendered to, relying upon whatever wisdom he gives. Whatever it is. That's a huge difference. Well, I believe you'll give me wisdom. I'm going to follow it, accept it, live by it, whatever it is. That's what James is talking about. So again, it's not primarily even an intellectual issue. It's a moral issue. It's not that God will give wisdom, but will I listen to it? That's why the central question today is the title of the sermon. Do I want to hear what God has to say? That's the real issue here. Is I ask God for, please give me your wisdom. Do I really want to hear it? Or have I decided, here's some things I don't want to hear? And that leads right into the next. Again, you have these two key components here. You have the belief, which should be translated faith, but also you have this idea of doubt. And this one is missing the point to all the major translations. Because when we hear the word doubt, what do we think of? I doubt it intellectually. You've made a statement, and I don't believe it's true. It's not likely to happen. I don't think it's true. I don't think it's likely. If I were to tell you the Jaguars are going to beat the Patriots today, Gene would say, I doubt it. Don't know absolutely for sure, who knows, but I highly doubt it. I highly doubt it. And I highly doubt it too. And that's how we use that word. I don't believe it. But again, James is contrasting doubt, not with belief, but with faith. So it means a little different, don't you think?
It's the biggest sin there is. It's unbelief, technically.
Well, it's the one that could, if you never believed in the truth and never committed to it, you're not going to get to heaven. But look what he says here.
And unbelief and all that stuff, it's all really the worst stuff.
Well, look what he says. If you doubt, and the New American Standard doesn't say just doubt, it says any doubting. You must ask in faith without any doubting whatsoever, or you won't receive the wisdom that you're asking for. You won't receive anything from the Lord. Anything at all. And it describes the life of such a person. You'll have a life that's like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. Is that the life anyone wants? But he says that's what's going to happen. And I don't know about you, doesn't that scare you somewhat? To think, wow, if I don't get this one right, that's my fate. It says it right here. I won't get wisdom, I won't get anything, and my life will be miserable, a wave blown and tossed by the wind. I don't want that. It scares me. Especially when I read this at first and I think, there's times when I ask God for things and I don't 100% believe. I like assign a percentage. I'm in the middle of the situation. God, please help this situation get better. I believe about 78% that you will, and about, what's that leave, 22%? I just don't know how you can pull it off. Ever get there? I mean, even if I'm higher than that, a 90, 95, am I ever 100% sure? Yes, God, Absolutely. Pray and this is going to happen. Which opens another door anyway. We aren't supposed to pray and we know absolutely what's going to happen. So it's not that we should be believing God will. I've said before, faith, you look in the Bible, it's not faith that this is going to happen. Doesn't it happen? That doesn't occur in the Bible one time, and it doesn't mean what we mean by it. Got to have faith that you're going to do this. The Bible talks about faith in God. I have faith in you whatever you do. But I still look at this and even like, God, is there even a possible way to do this? And man, and so am I in that situation? Asking faith without any doubting? And then another thing that always came to my mind when I saw this, do you ever read this passage in James and then think about the Father in Mark 9? Remember that story? Jesus is up on the Mount of Transfiguration. He starts to his glory is shown there in some limited, fashion in the sense that he glows. Moses and Elijah come. Peter, James, and John are up there with him on the mountain. It's this amazing experience. Remember what was happening down below? They come down and there's a father who had a demon-possessed son. And he had brought this son to Jesus. At the point, Jesus is up on the mountain, and so he asked his disciples to heal him. Disciples have healed all kinds of people. Jesus has sent them out prior, and they've healed, maybe risen people from the dead. Rose people from the dead? They brought people back to life who were dead. And so he brings his son, and they can't heal him. Well, Jesus comes down and sees this, and that's where it picks up. Mark 9:21, Jesus asked the boy's father, how long has he been like this? From childhood, he answered. The demon has thrown him into fire or water to kill him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us. Verse 23, if you can, said Jesus. And he's not rubbing it in the guy's face. I mean, you can't blame the guy. He came here expecting this child to be healed. Let the disciples give it a shot. Probably, you don't think they probably tried once and it didn't work. And they probably tried a few different approaches and angles. And, let's do it this way. And how about this? No, you take it. They weren't able to heal his son. And so he says, if you can. And Jesus says, if you can, everything is possible for the one who believes. Immediately the boy's father exclaimed, I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief.
That was honesty.
It's honesty.
What I said was honesty.
But look what he's being honest about. I do believe 83%. Help me overcome that 17 that I just can't get rid of. I mean, I just gave your apostles 12 shots. They couldn't get it done. I'm hoping you can. I believe, but I'm not absolutely sure. He had some doubt. But what happened to his son, you remember? His son gets healed. Well, how does that fit with James? James says, listen, you ask in faith without any doubting, because if you doubt at all, you won't get wisdom. You won't get anything you ask for. This father got his son healed. How do those two line up? Well, remember what we've said about faith. Faith has different aspects. Starts with the truth claim itself, but then you have, do I believe it's true? The assent, the intellectual, the in the mind. Then also, will I commit to it? Will I surrender to it? Will I rely upon it? That matter of the heart. And again, most often when we use the word doubt, it's the opposite of that first, not the truth, it's opposite of belief. I don't believe the Jaguars are going to beat the Patriots. I doubt it. I doubt it's going to happen. It's the opposite of that belief. But James is using the word, the opposite of that commitment side of faith. Again, faith, there's belief, I believe it in my mind, there's commitment, I'm committed to it in my heart, I surrender to it, I rely upon it. James is using doubt, opposite of that, not belief. It's not a matter of believe God will give you. We just said, believe He will give you. It's have faith. God, whatever wisdom you give me, I'm going to accept. I'm committed to it. Well, James is using this word doubt as the opposite of that. You must have faith, commitment to God, without doubting, without this side of you that says, no, God, I'm not going to do it. You see the difference?
Well, isn't it possible to have all of that and then still not be God's will for you to get that? And then
Absolutely, whether it's God's will. But he's not adding that qualification. He's simply saying you must ask in faith without any doubting.
But that doesn't assure automatically that you're going to get what you want, even if you have all that.
It doesn't assure. This is still not a magic formula that says if I ask in faith without any doubting, I'll get anything I want. But it is a clear statement that says if you don't ask in faith, if you do have doubt, you won't get anything you want. You see the difference? Again, it's still not a magic formula, but it's very clear. But here's the thing. Again, it's not a matter of I believe in my mind and I don't doubt that it's true. It's a matter of, God, I have faith. I'm committed to whatever answer. I'm not going to undermine that commitment. And even the word, this is the word, the reason why doubt is a bad translation here, and all the major translations use it. Again, and here's the thing, you may think, well, I don't know Greek, how am I supposed to get this? Well, if something doesn't make sense, and again, when you read this passage and then you read the Father in Mark, some part of you should say, wait, those two don't go to, how do you figure it out? And that causes you to dig deeper, whether you can do it yourself or you ask someone. That's what I did. I looked at that like, something's not right here. And as I dug deeper, this is what I found. The primary meaning of this word that's translated doubt, again, can it mean doubt? It can, but more often than not, it means to judge. It means to contend against or fight against. And I put some other verses where this exact same word is used. 1 Corinthians 6:5 says, is it possible there is nobody among you wise enough to judge a dispute? You wouldn't say nobody among you wise enough to doubt a dispute. Judge. What's that mean? That's mean to take it all in and make, here's what I'm going to do on the matter. Here's what's best in the matter. In that context, that's great. He says, I want someone wise enough to judge. But James is saying, don't ask God for wisdom. God, how's the best way to get through this situation? And then sit back and say, all right, God, I'm going to see if I like your wisdom. I'm going to judge and see if that's really the best solution or not. Because I hear a lot of things out here. See how you stack up. That's what James is saying. Contend against, Jude 9. But even the archangel Michael, when he was disputing with the devil about the body of Moses. Now that's a whole other story we don't know the details of. Can't wait to get to heaven and say, all right, what was that all about, God? Because it doesn't tell us about that anywhere else. But look what it says. It's that word disputing with. You wouldn't put, even the archangel Michael, when he was doubting the devil about the body of Moses. No, he was like, somehow he was fighting, contending, arguing. Well, apply that meaning to James. When you ask God for wisdom, you must ask in faith, total commitment and surrender, not contending against God. Like, God, no, I'm not going to do that. Tell me what's best, but if it's this, I ain't doing it. See, that's a whole different thing than you must believe God will give you wisdom. Don't doubt that in this situation it's too complicated even for God to figure it out. And that's how I've looked at that in the past, and it's how other people have. Believe and not doubt. And there's times I'm in something that's just so complicated. God, I'm not even sure you can figure this out. I believe you can about 97, 98%, but there's a part of me that says this is just so messed up. God says, that's okay. That's your human, yeah, you're going to have that. But he says, what I won't allow is for you to ask me for wisdom and sit back and say, I'm only going to listen to it if it's this. To say, God, let me see how your wisdom stacks up to other things I've heard. And it's not even so much that he won't give it, he can't give it. Because we're saying, here's all I'll let you give me, is right here. It has to fit in this lens. Which leads into what we're talking about. It's supported by verse 8. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Verse 8, such a person is double-minded and unstable in all they do. Now, he who doubts, it says, is double-minded. Well, what does that mean? Literally, the word means double-souled. In the New Testament, the word only occurs here and in James 4:8. There's no examples of it prior. A lot of people think James made up this word. You know, he took a little bit of this word, a little bit of that word, said, this is the word that conveys what I needed to convey. And so double-souled. And so the only help we have on what's it mean is where he uses it again in 4:8. Well, look what he says. Come near to God, and he will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Now that last part, what is that? Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. That's Hebrew poetry, remember? That's how they do their poetry. The word for it is parallelism, exactly. They think you say the same basic idea in two slightly different ways, and they're like, wow, that's beautiful poetry. Okay, that worked for them. It's really helpful for us, because look what lines up. Wash your hands, purify your hearts. you sinners, you double-minded. This is not a person that can't make up his mind. He's not saying you're a sinner if you can't decide whether to have chocolate or vanilla, or where we're going for lunch after church. You sinners, double-minded, you can't make up your mind. No, he's saying person who doesn't have a full commitment to God, double-souled. I'm with you, God, in this situation, but I'm not with you over here. I think I know better over here. You sure, God, you know what's best when it comes to not killing people, not murdering. Wow, you know what you're talking about there. But boy, when it comes to being honest and not lying all the time, no, I think I know a little better. When it comes to having self-control, not getting angry, I got you beat, God. My wisdom better than yours.
Well, that's expecting God to be a God of convenience and helping you when you need Him.
Right, double-souled. God, when I need you, I'll have you, but when I don't, no, I'm on my own. See, it's not double-minded, can't make up my mind. It's double-souled. I've made up my mind. I'm going to take God when I want Him and it fits me, and not when it doesn't. That's what James says, and it says that, you sinners, you double-minded. And so when he's saying there, such a person is double-minded. It's not he has trouble making up his mind, not he has trouble believing. He isn't committed to God. He's just in it for the convenience, when it fits me. And it corresponds to James' description of someone who doubts. Look what he says. A person who doubts is like a wave of the sea blown and tossed by the wind. See, the doubt isn't, I don't know for sure God can. It's, I'm not committed to it. I'll see if I like it. Well, he says that kind of person is like a wave of the sea blown and tossed by the wind. He's up one minute, he's down the next. Whatever the sea's doing, situation, that's how he's doing. There's no stability there. Because I'm not grounded on God. I'm grounded on the situation. Oh, it's going well now. Oh, I don't like it now. I'm up, I'm down. He's unstable in all he does. That word means restless, confused, and conflict. It's the word that's used of a drunk person trying to walk. So you know what? If you aren't committed to God, trying to walk, you might nail the line, for a minute, but then you're off the next. And that's what our life's like. If we don't have this faith, this commitment to God, if we have doubt. So again, go back and apply this. James says, consider it pure joy when you face trials of various kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance, and let perseverance finish its work so you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. And if you lack the wisdom to be able to do that, ask God. He is waiting to give it generously, faultlessly. He'll give it to all. For sure. The only condition is what he says here. You have to ask in faith. Not just I believe you can, believe you will give me wisdom. God, whatever it is, I'm open to it. Ask in faith without any doubting. Don't be sitting back saying, God, when I hear that wisdom, I'll see just what I think of it. I'll let you know if I'll follow it or not. That won't work, James says. It'll prevent us from receiving the wisdom. Again, it's not that God won't give. He's up there being stingy, like, I'll show you. He can't give it to us. We've already said, God, the only wisdom I'm taking is what fits right in my preset notion here. God says, well, my wisdom's outside of that. I can't give it to you then. I just can't. You won't get it. You'll miss it. Or anything from God. Well, why anything? Well, the blessings from God come as what? As we live for God, as we live the life He intends, as we live by His wisdom, committed to Him, without that doubt of uncommitment. Again, I hate to even use that word doubt because it's not what it means. Without the contending, without the judging.
That's interesting. That's a really interesting point.
And it's the only thing that, again, makes sense here. God's not going to penalize us because, I just can't get to 100% belief. That Father wasn't there. And a good reason for it. And you and I, we go through tough things. God knows that. And the real key is, what do I act out of? The part of me that believes it's best, or the part of me that, I'm just not sure? I act out of my belief, but it's one thing to just sit back and callously say, God, I'm not going to I'm not committed to you if I don't like what you say. That God won't tolerate. He can't. He's God. To say the God of the universe, the creator of the universe, sustainer, and sent His Son to redeem us. God, tell me what you got to say, and if I like it, I'll do it. That goes against the entire thing. What's the verse we talk about? If you want to be my disciple, you must take up your cross, lay down your life, and follow me. That is not someone who says, God, if you want to be my disciple, when I tell you what to do, you tell me if you like it or not. No, our initial agreement with God is, all right, I'm laying down my life, taking up my cross, and following you. person with the cross was not given a choice. Would you like to rest now? How about that? We want to stop in that little pastry shop before we get you to the crucifixion? There was none of that. That's the image that's used. That's what it has to be. And so what's the root problem today? I still think every time we look at it, there's something that it's even deeper than everything else. Today we need to surrender. We need to rely on God. Well, why wouldn't we? I stopped to think about, why wouldn't you surrender to God? Why wouldn't you rely upon God? And I thought, well, let's think about a person. Why don't we maybe trust a certain person? And I think the answer is either we know they're not trustworthy. Do you know some people? Like, I'm not going to trust them. Why? Well, because I've tried before. They weren't trustworthy. I've heard about it. They're not trustworthy. Or I don't know them enough to trust them. It's not that I know they're not, but I don't know they are, and this is pretty big. I'm not willing to trust them. Well, think about God. Definitely, if we know Him at all, it's not that we know He's untrustworthy. The only option is we don't know God well enough to trust Him. Because if you really knew, again, stop and think about it. If I really knew, if it just really has soaked in, He is the creator of the world. And why did He create? Because He wanted a relationship with me. He's a sustainer of all, and we've seen this through Genesis. Look at all He's done to fulfill that promise. Like, okay, you screwed it up, but I still want a relationship. I'm going to send my Son. It's going to take a lot of work, and we're seeing that through Genesis. And then He finally does. He sends His Son, and His Son, who is God Himself, says, I wish there was a plan B, but if there's not, I'm going to do it. You really get to know that God. There's no reason not to trust Him. There's no reason not to surrender to Him, not to rely upon Him. And so that's the key to overcoming. I got to get to know God even more. I got to get into His Word and see what it says. I've got to live it out in life. I've got to trust Him. And you know what? God is gracious in the sense He doesn't give us a magnitude 10 situation right off the bat. He starts with us where we are. Trust me in this and see. And then the next one's going to be a little more difficult, and it's going to get more difficult. Trust me, but He starts us out, but we've got to do it. Before we see absolutely how it's going to work out, I've got to trust Him in the situation He's got me in right now. And then also the third leg of that growth triangle, I need to talk about it with other Christians. I need to help them. I need their encouragement. This is not easy stuff. And I got Satan working against me. And so His Word, situations, and other people. Well, lastly today, I thought about some questions. Just to try to make this, and I do feel like in this sense it's good to come at things from different angles, and maybe this one will get you, maybe that one. But first of all, what is the makeup of my faith? Now that I know faith includes, again, that truth element, and the Bible says this is true, but those two key elements of belief and trust. It's one thing to ask, do I believe there is a God? Do I believe Jesus is His Son, died for me? I'm assuming the answer for most of us here is yes. But what about the trust side? Because I can't just say, yeah, do I have faith? Well, yeah, I believe in God. Because now we realize, well, there's the belief side and the trust. Am I surrendered to God? Whatever He says, all right. Do I rely upon God? God, you and your principles can get me through this situation, or do I rely upon myself? Where's my belief, but where's my trust? Are they both present? Apply it to some trial maybe you faced recently or you're facing right now. Do I believe God will or has provided wisdom, but then the other side, am I committed to following it? It's not just, God, I know you've got a way that can get me through this, but I'm willing to follow it, whatever it is. I had some thoughts about this recently. It's like, okay, I sort of see what you say, God. Oh, man, I like my way so much better. Just seems like, some part of me that just seems that's the way. I'm going to try it again. Hasn't worked all these times, but I'll try it one more. Again, God's up there with the wisdom. I can't receive it because I'm just saying no. And then do I have doubt? And again, that word doubt, do I have this judging, this fighting against? Examine times you've asked God for wisdom and guidance. Were you open to any answer? Or did you sort of have it narrowed down? God, what do I do? Here's the choices, A, B, or C. Which one should I do, God? God's going to give us none of the above sometimes. And we have to be open to that. Am I surrendered? Am I reliant now? I really think that this here is the key to much of the distress and despair, the lack of peace and the lack of joy. It describes it. This kind of person, if you don't have the faith, if you have the doubt, you are like a wave of the sea blown and tossed by the wind. You're unstable. You're a drunk person trying to make your way through life, and you're wondering why this isn't going so well. This is the key. It's not the outward situations. It's the presence of doubt. Presence of doubt. And again, not the opposite of belief. There's always, boy, this situation looks so tough, Lord. All right, I believe you can do it. But it's the opposite of the commitment that says, God, I'll do whatever you tell me in this situation, including I'll endure through this situation if you don't tell me some way to get out of it. Sometimes we think, again, I have faith that God's going to give me a solution to this. No, you need to have faith. I need to have faith in God, whatever. Maybe there's never going to be a solution this side of heaven. All right, God, you're God. I'm not. You're in control. You love me. This can bring glory to you. I can still have joy. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of various many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And let perseverance finish its work so that you can be mature and complete, not lacking anything that God wants you to have. And if you need wisdom to see your way through that, God says, ask for it. I will give it to you. As long as you're really asking for my wisdom and not my check off to what you've already decided. Our life can be different. And if we're looking at it and it's not that way, if I feel a little wave tossed, if I feel a little unstable, I need to look and see. Is this the reason? Definitely the first place to look, because James makes a clear connection between those. Well, what do you get from that? What do we do with that? How do we become wiser?